The cargo hauler hit the moon's surface harder than Jake Mitchell had planned. Alarms screamed through the cockpit as the landing struts absorbed the impact, and he could hear the sickening groan of metal bending somewhere in the ship's belly. He killed the engines and sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the controls, heart pounding in his chest. That could have gone better, he muttered to himself. The debris field had appeared on his sensors with barely any warning. One moment he was cruising through empty space, the next he was dodging chunks of old mining equipment spinning through the void like deadly confetti. One piece had caught his starboard side, tearing through the hull plating like paper. Now here he was, stranded on Thyra 7, a rust-colored moon that looked like it had given up on life a few million years ago. Jake unbuckled his harness and made his way to the airlock. The external scanners showed breathable atmosphere, which was about the only good news he'd had all day. He grabbed his toolkit and headed outside to assess the damage. The red sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Everything on this moon seemed to be some shade of rust or copper, from the rocky ground beneath his boots to the distant hills that rolled away toward the darkening sky. The air tasted metallic and a cold wind cut through his flight jacket. Jake walked around his ship, examining the damage to the starboard panel. It was bad. Not catastrophic, but definitely not something he could fix in an hour or two. He'd be stuck here overnight at least, maybe longer if he couldn't fabricate the right parts. That's when he heard it. The sound made him stop mid-step, his hand automatically moving to the plasma pistol on his hip. It wasn't a natural sound, not wind or rocks settling. It was something alive, something in pain. A howl that started low and climbed higher, mixing with what sounded almost like grinding machinery. The sound of suffering. Jake knew he should ignore it. This moon was supposed to be uninhabited, just another dead rock used for mining decades ago and then abandoned. Whatever was making that noise was probably dangerous. Probably something he should stay far away from. But he couldn't. Something about that sound pulled at him, demanded attention. He followed it, climbing over a rocky ridge about 50 meters from his ship. The sound grew louder, more desperate. And then he saw it, and every muscle in his body locked up. The creature was enormous. If Jake had to compare it to something from Earth, he'd say it looked like a wolf that had been crossed with something from a nightmare and then dipped in starlight. It had to be at least 2 meters long, with powerful legs and a sleek body covered in fur that seemed to shift colors in the dying light. Silver one moment, then blue, then almost black. But what really caught his attention were the 4 eyes, each one glowing with an inner light, and the crystalline spines that ran down its back like a ridge of living gemstones, pulsing with faint blue luminescence. Beautiful didn't seem like the right word for something so clearly built to kill, but Jake couldn't think of a better one. And it was dying. The creature was caught in some kind of energy snare, the kind illegal hunters used on protected worlds. The plasma field had burned through the creature's side, leaving charred flesh and exposed muscle. One of its back legs was nearly severed, held on by what looked like strips of tissue and sheer stubbornness. The smell of burned meat and ozone filled the air. "Captain Mitchell," Vera's voice crackled through his comm unit, making him jump. "I am detecting a VYRN specimen approximately 47 meters from your current position. I must remind you that VYRNs are classified as aggressive megafauna. Galactic protocol requires non-interference with indigenous wildlife. Furthermore, the Galactic Council has determined this species lacks sentient status." Jake barely heard her. He was watching the creature's 4 eyes lock onto him. Even through its agony, the VYRN tried to snarl, tried to lunge toward him despite the snare holding it in place and the injuries that should have killed it already. The plasma field crackled, sending another wave of energy through its body, and the creature let out that sound again. That terrible, pain-filled howl that Jake felt vibrate through his rib cage. He should walk away. He should get back in his ship, make his repairs, and leave this moon like he'd never seen anything. That was the smart play. The safe play. The legal play. But Jake found himself thinking about his sister, Amy. She'd been gone for 3 years now, killed in a pirate raid on the colony where she'd been teaching. Amy had been the kind of person who would stop her car to help a turtle cross the road. Who would spend her weekends volunteering at animal shelters. Who had once lectured him for an hour about why every living thing deserved compassion. Even the ugly ones, even the dangerous ones. "Everything deserves a fighting chance, Jake," she told him the last time they'd talked. "Even when nobody else thinks they're worth saving." Jake took a step forward, his hands raised and empty, palms out where the creature could see them. "Easy there," he said, his voice soft despite his racing heart. "I'm not going to hurt you, okay? Just take it easy." The VYRN's growl deepened, a sound that promised violence if he came any closer. But Jake kept walking, kept talking, letting his voice stay calm and steady. Another step. Then another. Moving slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching a frightened dog instead of an alien predator that could probably tear him apart with one swipe. As he got closer, Jake could see more details. The intelligence in those 4 eyes, sharp and aware despite the pain. The way the creature's crystalline spines dimmed and brightened with what might have been emotion or just biological response to trauma. The careful way it tracked his movement, calculating, thinking. This wasn't just an animal. Jake had been around enough animals in his life to know the difference. There was something more here, something that looked back at him and understood what was happening. Vera, Jake said quietly, never taking his eyes off the V1. Prep the cargo bay. Medical configuration. We're taking on a passenger. Captain Mitchell, I must protest. This action violates 7 separate interstellar regulations. Additionally, bringing an injured VYRN aboard poses significant risk to your personal safety. The likelihood of survival for both you and the creature is... Yeah, I know, Jake interrupted. He reached for the snare's release mechanism, his hand steady despite everything screaming at him that this was insane. Start the medical scan anyway. We're doing this. The VYRN watched him, those 4 glowing eyes never blinking as Jake's fingers found the release switch. Their gazes locked, human and alien, and something passed between them in that moment. An understanding maybe. Or maybe just 2 beings recognizing each other's stubborn refusal to give up. Jake pressed the button, and the snare deactivated with a sharp electric crack. Getting the VYRN aboard the ship had been a nightmare. The creature fought every step, even half dead from its injuries. Jake had fashioned a makeshift stretcher from cargo netting and somehow dragged 200 kilograms of thrashing alien predator up the loading ramp. By the time he got it secured in the cargo bay, both of them were bleeding and exhausted. But that was just the beginning. Vera hit it with the sedative. Standard dosage for something this size, Jake ordered, watching the creature struggle against the magnetic restraints he'd rigged across the bay floor. The medical arm extended, injected the compound directly into the VYRN's bloodstream. For about 10 seconds, Jake thought it might actually work. The creature's movements slowed, its 4 eyes started to dim. Then it roared back to full awareness, thrashing harder than before. Captain, the sedative appears to have no effect. The creature's metabolism is processing the compound at an accelerated rate. Attempting secondary formula. The second injection did nothing. Neither did the third. Jake watched in growing horror as Vera cycled through every sedative in the ship's medical database, and the VYRN rejected all of them like they were water. Its biology was completely alien, operating on principles that human medicine couldn't touch. Forget the sedatives, Jake finally said. We do this the hard way. The hard way turned out to be brutal for both of them. Jake had to work on the creature while it was fully conscious, fully aware, and fully capable of killing him. The magnetic restraints held its body in place, but its head could still move, those jaws could still snap, and those crystalline spines could still cut. Jake learned that last part when he leaned in too close to examine the plasma burns on its side. The VYRN twisted, one of the spines on its back caught him across the shoulder, and suddenly his jacket was in ribbons and his skin was opened up like someone had taken a razor to it. The pain hit him like a hammer. Jake staggered backward, lost his balance, and slammed into the cargo bay bulkhead hard enough to see stars. He slid down to the floor, clutching his shoulder, feeling hot blood run between his fingers. The cut was deep, bone deep maybe. For a long moment, Jake just sat there on the cold metal floor, breathing hard, his shoulder on fire. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears. Every breath sent fresh jolts of agony through the wound. The VYRN watched him with those 4 glowing eyes. Not aggressive now, just watching. Waiting. Like it expected him to do what everyone else probably did when things got too hard. Give up. Walk away. Leave it to die alone. Jake pushed himself to his feet. His legs shook and his vision swam for a second, but he stayed upright. He grabbed a medical patch from the kit on the wall, slapped it over his shoulder without bothering to clean the wound first. There'd be time for proper treatment later. Maybe. Not giving up on you, he said, looking directly into those alien eyes. So you might as well get used to it. He got back to work. Hour after hour, Jake fought to keep the creature alive. Vera's medical scanners revealed a biology that seemed designed to make his life difficult. The VYRN had 3 hearts, not 1. Its blood wasn't red but a deep blue that looked almost black. Its body temperature swung wildly between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius with no apparent pattern. And those plasma burns weren't just surface damage. The energy had cooked deep into the tissue, releasing toxins that were spreading through its bloodstream like poison. Every fix Jake tried seemed impossible. Every solution felt like it should fail. The temperature fluctuations nearly killed the creature twice. Jake watched the scanner spike to dangerous levels, saw the VRN's breathing become labored and rapid. In desperation, he grabbed emergency coolant packs from the engine room, the kind meant for critical system failures, and packed them around the creature's body. The temperature in the cargo bay dropped so fast that frost formed on the walls. Jake's breath came out in white clouds. His fingers went numb within minutes. But the VRN's temperature stabilized. The toxins were worse. Vera's analysis showed compounds that didn't exist in any database, poison that human medicine had no answer for. Jake stared at the readouts, watching the toxin levels climb higher, knowing that in another few hours they'd reach fatal concentrations. He couldn't just watch it die. Not after coming this far. Jake started mixing compounds from his own medical supplies. Antibiotics, antivenoms, anti-inflammatories, things that had no business being combined. He created a cocktail that should have killed the creature instantly. His hands shook as he loaded it into an injector. This is probably going to make things worse, he told the VRN. But doing nothing definitely will. He moved in close, aimed for the creature's chest between two of its hearts, and jabbed the injector home. The VRN's jaws snapped at him, missing his hand by maybe 2 centimeters. He felt the wind from those teeth. The hours blurred together. Jake lost track of time. His shoulder throbbed with every movement. His hands were covered in blood, both his and the creature's. The cargo bay looked like a disaster zone, littered with empty medical containers, bloodied bandages and tools scattered everywhere. Captain, Vera's voice cut through the fog in his brain. I'm receiving multiple transmissions on emergency channels. The Hunters Guild has issued a bounty for your arrest. Apparently, the VRN you rescued was designated as their prize specimen. They're calling you a thief and demanding your immediate surrender. Jake didn't look up from where he was stitching the creature's leg back together. His hands moved on autopilot now, threading the needle through alien flesh that was tougher than leather. Let them come. Captain, the bounty is substantial. Multiple hunter groups are likely already en route to this sector. Good for them. Jake kept working. Kept talking too because the silence in the cargo bay was too heavy, too full of doubt. He told the VRN about Earth, about real wolves running through forests covered in snow. He talked about his sister Amy, and how she'd spent every weekend at the animal shelter in their hometown. How she'd always believed that kindness mattered, even when the rest of the world said it didn't. Amy used to say every creature understands kindness, even if they can't speak it back, Jake murmured, his voice rough from exhaustion. God, I hope she was right. I really hope she was right about that. The 36th hour came and went. Jake's hands wouldn't stop shaking. His vision kept blurring at the edges. He'd pushed past tired hours ago and was running on something else now. Stubbornness maybe. Or just the refusal to let another living thing die if he could prevent it. Finally he finished the last stitch. The VRN's breathing had evened out. The blue blood had stopped flowing. The toxin levels on Vera's scanners were dropping slowly but steadily. Jake set down his tools and collapsed against the cargo bay wall. He couldn't stand anymore. Couldn't think straight. His whole body felt like one giant bruise. Through his blurred vision, he saw one of the VRN's luminescent eyes open slowly. It focused directly on him with a clarity that cut through the exhaustion. And for the first time since he'd found the creature dying in that snare, it didn't growl. Didn't snarl. Just looked at him with something that might have been understanding. Jake managed a weak smile before his eyes closed and darkness took him. Jake's eyes snapped open. Something felt different. Wrong maybe. Or maybe not wrong at all. He sat up slowly, his hand going to his shoulder. Still sore from where that spine had caught him 3 days ago. The pain was a dull throb now, nothing he couldn't handle. Then he saw it. The VRN had moved. The massive creature, injured leg and all, had somehow dragged itself across the entire cargo bay. It was lying right next to the spot where Jake had been sleeping. Those 4 glowing eyes were fixed on him with such focus, such awareness, that Jake felt his heart skip a beat. What are you doing over here? Jake whispered. His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. You're supposed to be resting, big guy? The creature's head tilted slightly. Those strange ear-like appendages on top of its head twitched when Jake spoke. It was listening. Really listening. Jake pushed himself to his feet, moving carefully. Every muscle in his body still complained from the fight. But the VRN had it worse. That leg was bad. Real bad. And here it had dragged itself all the way across the bay just to be near him. You're either really brave or really stupid, Jake muttered. But there was no bite to his words. Just wonder. The next few days changed everything. Jake had set up a feeding routine. He'd synthesized some nutrient paste using what little biological data Vera could pull from her damaged files. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first time he brought it over, the VYRN wanted nothing to do with it. The massive head turned away, almost like a stubborn child refusing dinner. "Come on," Jake said softly. He sat down on the cold metal floor, bowl in his hands. "I know it doesn't look great. Probably doesn't taste great either. But you need to eat something." "Nothing." The creature just stared at the far wall. Jake tried something different. He scooped up some of the paste on his fingers and held it out. "Please," he said quietly. "Just try it." "For me?" The VRN's head turned. Those 4 eyes studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, hesitantly, the creature leaned forward. Its tongue was rough and warm as it took the food from Jake's hand. "There you go," Jake breathed. Relief flooded through him. "See? Not so bad." From that moment on, the VRN ate from his hand every time. Not from a bowl. Only when Jake offered it directly. One morning, Jake was sitting with the creature, checking its wounds, when Vera spoke up. "Captain, I need to tell you something." "Yeah." "I've been monitoring the VRN's neural activity. The patterns I'm seeing, they're not what I expected." Jake looked up from the bandage he was adjusting. "What do you mean?" "This creature is displaying advanced cognitive functions. Pattern recognition. Problem-solving abilities. Even what appear to be complex emotional responses. Captain, the Council's scientific classification of VYRN intelligence may be completely wrong." Jake had already started to suspect as much. Over the past few days he'd been testing something. When he said certain words in a calm tone, words like okay, and safe, and good, the VRN would relax. His breathing would slow. Those glowing eyes would soften. But when Jake said words like careful, or danger, or watch out, even in the same gentle voice, the creature would tense. It would become alert, scanning the room for threats. It wasn't just reacting to tone. It was understanding the words themselves. "You know what I'm saying, don't you?" Jake asked the VRN one afternoon. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and the massive creature had its head resting near his knee. "You actually understand me?" The VRN's eyes blinked slowly. "What?" "Twice." Like it was agreeing. Jake reached out carefully and placed his hand on the creature's head. The VRN didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into the touch. Something was forming between them. Something Jake couldn't quite name. It wasn't just man and animal. It was deeper than that. More equal. They were becoming partners. Friends even. That's when everything went wrong. Jake was examining the VRN's leg one morning, checking to see if the swelling had gone down, when Vera's alarm system exploded to life. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. "Captain, immediate threat detected. 3 armed individuals have breached the airlock." "There." The cargo bay door blew apart. The explosion was massive. Metal shrieked and tore. Smoke filled the air. Jake threw himself backward, shielding his eyes from the debris. Through the smoke, 3 figures emerged. They were dressed in heavy combat gear, weapons raised and ready. Professional hunters. Guild hunters. "Stand down, human," the leader barked. His voice was cold, mechanical through his helmet. "That creature is guild property. Step away from it." Jake's blood ran cold. He pushed himself to his feet, positioning himself between the hunters and the VRN. "No," he said simply. The leader laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You don't get a choice in this, scavenger. We've got orders. That VRN is worth more credits than you'll see in your entire pathetic life." Jake felt movement behind him. The VRN was struggling to stand, injured legs shaking with the effort. "Stay down," Jake said without turning around. "You're hurt. Let me." But the VRN didn't stay down. Instead, it moved faster than Jake thought possible. Despite the injuries, despite the pain it had to be in, the creature lunged forward. But not toward the hunters. The VRN positioned itself directly between Jake and the armed intruders. It was protecting him. Jake's throat tightened. The massive creature, barely able to stand, was trying to shield him with its own body. A low growl started deep in the VRN's chest. It was so deep, so powerful, that Jake could feel it through the metal deck plates beneath his feet. "Well, that's new," one of the hunters muttered. Jake grabbed the plasma cutter from his tool belt. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all he had. He moved to stand beside the VRN, not behind it. "You want him?" Jake said quietly. "Then you're going to have to go through both of us." The hunters exchanged glances. Then they laughed. "Look at this," the leader said. "The scavenger thinks he's some kind of hero. This ought to be fun." They spread out, trying to flank them. Professional tactics. They'd done this before. But they hadn't counted on what happened next. Jake saw the hunter on the left raising his weapon. Instinct took over. Left, he shouted. The VYRN shifted immediately, turning to face the threat. The hunter's shot went wide, missing by inches. Another hunter tried to circle around behind them. Jake caught the movement from the corner of his eye. Behind, he called out. The VYRN spun, keeping itself between Jake and the new threat. Its tail lashed out, forcing the hunter to stumble backward. They moved together. Human and VYRN. Jake would spot the danger and call it out. The creature would respond instantly, trusting his eyes and his voice completely. When one of them dodged, the other followed. When Jake went right, the VYRN went right. It was like they'd been fighting together for years instead of days. "What the hell is this?" one of the hunters shouted. There was fear in his voice now. Real fear. The leader's weapon was shaking. "This isn't possible. VYRN don't bond with humans. They can't." "Get out," Jake said. His voice was low, dangerous. Beside him, the VYRN's growl deepened, matching his tone perfectly. The hunters looked at each other. Then at Jake and the VYRN. Then back at each other. "This isn't worth it," one of them said. The guild said. "I don't care what the guild said. I'm not dying for this." Their weapons lowered. First one, then another, then all three. They backed toward the destroyed door, their boots crunching on the debris. "This isn't over," the leader said. But his voice had lost its edge. "Yeah, it is," Jake replied. "Now get off my ship." They ran. Actually ran. 3 professional hunters, fleeing from an injured creature and an unarmed scavenger. The moment they were gone, the VYRN collapsed. "No, no, no," Jake dropped to his knees beside the creature. The wounds had reopened. Blood, dark, almost black, was seeping through the bandages. "Why did you do that? You could have died, you stupid brave." His voice broke. Tears were streaming down his face, hot and unexpected. He grabbed his medical kit with shaking hands, but he didn't know where to start. There was so much blood. The VYRN's massive head lifted. Slowly, carefully, it pressed against Jake's chest. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberate, that Jake stopped moving. Stopped thinking. Just felt. Trust. That's what it was. The creature trusted him completely. Jake's arms came up and wrapped around the VYRN's neck. He held on tight, his face pressed against the creature's rough hide, and just let himself cry. For all the fear. For all the loneliness. For this impossible bond that had formed between 2 beings who shouldn't have even understood each other. "I've got you," Jake whispered. "I promise. I've got you." They stayed like that for a long time. Man and VYRN. 2 outcasts against the galaxy. Finally Jake pulled back. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and got to work on the wounds. His hands were steady now. Determined. "Vera," he said, his voice rough but firm. "New priority. I need you to plot a course. Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can hide while he heals." There was a pause. Then Vera's voice came back, and for the first time, Jake thought he detected actual concern in her digital tone. "Captain, the guild has issued a system-wide alert. Your identification codes are flagged. Your ship's signature is being tracked. There is nowhere safe in this entire sector." Jake looked down at the VYRN. Those 4 eyes were watching him, trusting him to find a way. He remembered something. Words from a long time ago from someone he'd cared about. Someone he'd lost. "Promise me you'll never stop fighting for what's right," she'd said. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Jake had made that promise. And he intended to keep it. "Then we don't find somewhere safe," Jake said quietly. "We make somewhere safe. Chart a course out of guild space. All the way to the outer rim if we have to. Find me a place where nobody asks questions and nobody cares about council laws." "Captain, that's what we're doing, Vera. Plot the course." A moment of silence. Then, course plotted. Engaging engines. The ship rumbled to life beneath them. Jake felt the subtle shift as they began to move, leaving the debris field behind. Leaving the guild hunters behind. Heading into the unknown. The VYRN made a soft sound. Not quite a growl. Something gentler. "Yeah," Jake said, running his hand along the creature's neck. "We're going to be okay. Both of us. I don't know how yet, but we're going to figure it out." Outside the viewport, stars began to streak past as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. Into the darkness. Into uncertainty. But they were together. And somehow that made all the difference. The research station floated in the darkness like a lonely lighthouse in an endless ocean. It was small, barely bigger than Jake's cargo ship, but it was perfectly positioned. Right on the edge of neutral space, far away from any council jurisdiction. No patrols. No surveillance. No rules. Dr. Rachel Foster had built this place with her own hands over the course of 5 years. She was a scientist who'd gotten tired of the council telling her what she could and couldn't research. Out here she answered to nobody. She studied what she wanted, when she wanted, how she wanted. She was also one of the few people Jake Mitchell actually trusted. They'd met years ago on a mining station. Jake had been younger then, less worn down by the galaxy. Rachel had been trying to smuggle out data on council mining practices that were destroying entire ecosystems. Jake had helped her escape. They'd been friends ever since, though they didn't see each other often. Space was big and they both preferred to keep moving. So when Rachel's encrypted comm terminal lit up with an incoming message from Jake, she almost smiled. Almost. Then she saw the message header was marked urgent in red letters. That wasn't like him. Jake didn't panic. Jake didn't do urgent. She opened the message half expecting it to be some kind of joke. Maybe he'd finally found a working coffee maker on one of his salvage runs. He'd been complaining about that for years. Instead she read, I have a VWARN. It's sentient. I can prove it. Please help. Rachel stared at the words. Read them again. Then a third time. Oh Jake, she muttered. What have you gotten yourself into? There was a video attachment. She almost didn't want to open it, but curiosity won out. It always did with Rachel. That's what made her a good scientist and a terrible person at staying safe. The video loaded, and Rachel's jaw dropped. There was Jake sitting cross-legged on the floor of his cargo bay. And next to him, close enough to touch, was a massive VWARN. The creature's 4 eyes were focused on Jake's face. Its crystalline spines were pulsing with a soft blue light. As Rachel watched, Jake said something she couldn't quite hear. The VWARN's head tilted. Then it moved closer and pressed its massive head against Jake's shoulder. Like a pet dog. Like a friend. Jake reached up and scratched behind the creature's ear-like appendages. The VWARN's eyes half closed in what looked like pure contentment. Impossible, Rachel breathed. But the video kept playing. Jake stood up and walked to the other side of the cargo bay. The VWARN followed, limping slightly. Jake turned and held up his hand. Stay, he said clearly. The VWARN stopped. Sat down. Waited. Come, Jake said, and the creature immediately moved to his side. This wasn't training. Training took months, years. This was understanding. Communication. Partnership. Rachel played the video 3 more times. Then she sent back a single word, come. 2 days later, Jake's ship appeared on her sensors. Rachel was waiting at the docking port when the airlock cycled open. Jake stepped through and he looked terrible. His clothes were stained, his face was drawn with exhaustion, and there was a bandage on his shoulder. Jake, Rachel said carefully. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yeah. Jake's voice was rough but steady. I saved him. Him? Whatever. Storm Chaser. That's what he calls himself, I think. Though I can't actually hear most of what he says. Jake turned and gestured back toward his ship. Come meet him. Rachel followed, her heart pounding. She'd studied VWARN from a distance. She'd analyzed their behavior patterns through telescopic observation. She'd even examined dead specimens. But she'd never been this close to a living one. The cargo bay was dim. For a moment, Rachel didn't see anything. Then the shadows moved and the VWARN emerged. Those 4 glowing eyes fixed on her immediately. The creature was enormous up close, easily twice Jake's height at the shoulder. Rachel froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was a predator. An apex predator. One of the most dangerous creatures in known space. But Jake walked right up to it without hesitation. He placed his hand on the creature's neck, and those glowing eyes softened. It's okay, Jake said. Not to Rachel. To the VWARN. She's a friend. She's here to help. The VWARN made a low sound. Not quite a growl. Something gentler. Then it settled down onto the deck plates, making itself smaller. Less threatening. He understands you, Rachel whispered. He understands everything, Jake replied. That's why I need your help. I need to prove it. I need real data, real scans, something the council can't ignore. Rachel spent the next 6 hours running every test she could think of. She set up her portable scanner and analyzed the VWARN's brain activity. She monitored its responses to various stimuli. She watched how it interacted with Jake, how it solved simple puzzles she set up, how it reacted to different situations. The results made her hands shake. Jake, she said finally. Her voice cracked. Jake, you need to see this. They moved to her small lab, leaving the VWRN resting in the cargo bay. Rachel pulled up her findings on the main display. Charts and graphs filled the screen. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a neural scan. "This is the VWRN's brain activity when you were talking to it. See these patterns? This is linguistic processing. Not just pattern recognition. Actual language comprehension." Jake leaned closer. "Meaning?" "Meaning it understands words. Syntax. Context. The way you and I do." Rachel switched to another screen. "And look at this. This is subsonic analysis. I picked up vocalizations below human hearing range. Complex ones. They have patterns. Structure. Grammar maybe. They have their own language," Jake said quietly. "They have their own language," Rachel confirmed. She pulled up another set of data. "And it's not just that. Look at the cognitive tests. Problem-solving ability on par with dolphins. Maybe even higher. Memory retention that's extraordinary. And this," she pointed to a particularly dense graph. "This suggests they have social structures. Family groups. They pass down knowledge through generations." The room fell silent. Rachel and Jake both stared at the data, understanding what it meant. "They're not animals," Jake said. "No," Rachel agreed. "They're not animals. They're people. They're sentient, sapient beings with language and culture and families." Jake's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists. "The council classified them as dangerous predators. No higher intelligence. That's what the official records say." Rachel pulled up a different set of files. Mining reports. Resource assessments. Colonization permits. "I know. And I think I know why. Look at this. VWRN homeworlds are incredibly rich in rare minerals. Viridium deposits. Crystalline arrays. Element 47. All the things the council needs for their expansion projects." Jake's face went pale. "If they're classified as animals? Then colonization doesn't require any ethical oversight," Rachel finished. "No need for first contact protocols. No need for diplomatic relations. You can just move in, claim the resources, and hunt anything that gets in your way." "They're being hunted for sport," Jake said. His voice was barely a whisper. "On their own worlds. While those worlds are being strip-mined." Rachel nodded. She felt sick. She'd suspected something like this for years, but having the proof in front of her made it real. "I need to show you something else," she said. She walked to a workbench and picked up a small device. It looked like a translator unit but modified heavily. "I've been working on this for a while. A subsonic bridge. If I'm right about their language structure, this might let us actually communicate with them. Real communication. Back and forth." Jake's eyes widened. "You can talk to him?" "Maybe. Let's find out." They returned to the cargo bay. The VWRN was still resting, but its eyes opened when they approached. Rachel set up the device, adjusting frequencies and calibrations. "This might not work," she warned. "I've never tested it on a living subject before." "He trusts me," Jake said. "If it doesn't hurt him, he'll let us try." Rachel activated the device. For a moment nothing happened. Then the VWRN's ear-like appendages perked up. Its head lifted. It made a sound, low, rumbling, almost below the threshold of hearing. The device beeped, processed, and then a synthesized voice emerged from the speakers. "You saved me." "Why?" Jake's breath caught in his throat. Rachel saw tears forming in his eyes. It was real. This was real. They were hearing actual words from the VWRN. Not just understanding intent or reading body language. Actual translated speech. "Because it was the right thing to do," Jake said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Because you needed help." The VWRN's crystalline spines lit up. Bright blue light pulsed along them in waves. Rachel checked her readings quickly. "That's an emotional response," she said softly. "Positive emotion. Joy maybe. Or gratitude." The VWRN spoke again. "My pack scattered. Young ones hunted. I fought. I failed." Jake moved closer. He placed his hand on the creature's head, right between those glowing eyes. "You didn't fail. You survived. And we're going to make this right." "What's your name?" Jake asked. "Do you have a name?" The translation matrix took a moment longer this time. The VWRN's vocalizations were more complex, layered. Finally the device spoke. "Storm Chaser." "I am? Storm Chaser." "Storm Chaser," Jake repeated. "That's a good name." "I'm Jake. This is Rachel." Storm Chaser's eyes moved to Rachel. "Understand. I know truth." "I know the truth," Rachel confirmed. She felt her throat tighten. And I'm going to help Jake prove it to everyone else. She returned to her lab and came back with a small data chip. It looked insignificant. Just a tiny piece of technology no bigger than her thumbnail. But Rachel held it like it was the most precious thing in the galaxy. This is everything, she told Jake. Full proof of VYRN sentience. All the biological data. The neurological scans. The linguistic analysis. Recordings of storm chasers speaking. Cognitive test results. Everything the Council would need to reclassify the VYRN as a sentient species. Jake reached for it, but Rachel didn't let go immediately. You need to understand what this means, she said. If you broadcast this, if you go public with this information, the Council will do everything in their power to stop you. They'll call you a liar. They'll say the data is fake. They'll discredit you, arrest you, maybe worse. And the Guild? The Guild will want you dead. You'll be the most wanted human in known space. Jake met her eyes. And if I don't? If you don't, then an entire species stays enslaved. Storm Chaser's pack, his family, all the VYRN on all their worlds, they keep being hunted and killed while nobody knows they're people. Storm Chaser made a sound. The translator picked it up. You would risk for my kind? Jake turned to the massive creature. This being he'd saved, who'd saved him in return. He reached up and scratched behind Storm Chaser's crystalline spines, right in the spot he'd learned the VYRN liked best. We've come this far together, Jake said. I'm not stopping now. That's what pack means, right? We stick together. We protect each other. Storm Chaser's entire body lit up. Blue light cascaded across every spine, every ridge. Rachel's scanner went wild. That's the VYRN equivalent of a smile, she said, amazed. I think that's joy. Pure joy. The translated voice came through again. Pack is forever. Jake took the data chip from Rachel. He looked at it for a long moment, feeling the weight of what it represented. Then he slipped it into his pocket. Then let's change the galaxy, he said. Storm Chaser stood, moving to Jake's side. The two of them stood together, human and VYRN, looking out at the stars through the cargo bay viewport. Rachel watched them and knew nothing would ever be the same again. For any of them. For anyone. The truth was out there now. And truth, once released, couldn't be stopped. Jake's fingers moved across the control panel with steady precision. He'd done this kind of work 1,000 times before. Routing signals, bypassing security protocols, accessing communication networks. But he'd never done anything that mattered quite this much. Are you sure about this? Rachel's voice came through the comm link from her research station. Once you send it, there's no taking it back. Jake looked over his shoulder. Storm Chaser was watching him from across the cargo bay, those four glowing eyes patient and trusting. The VYRN had learned to wait while Jake worked with technology, though Jake knew Storm Chaser didn't really understand what all the screens and buttons meant. I'm sure, Jake said. He turned back to the controls. How do I look? All channels are open. Emergency frequencies. News networks. Independent forums. Public message boards. Even some military channels I probably shouldn't have been able to access. Rachel paused. Jake, the moment you hit send, every authority in known space is going to know where you are. Good, Jake replied. That's kind of the point. He took a deep breath. His finger hovered over the transmission button. One press. That's all it would take. One press and everything would change. He pressed it. The data burst outward at the speed of light. Every scan Rachel had taken. Every test result. Every piece of proof that the VYRN were sentient, intelligent, thinking beings with language and culture and families. And along with the data, he'd included video. Hours of footage showing him and Storm Chaser together. Talking. Working as a team. Being friends. The final video was just 30 seconds long. Jake sitting on the cargo bay floor, Storm Chaser's massive head resting in his lap. This is Storm Chaser, Jake said to the camera. He's not a monster. He's not property. He's a person. And the Council has been lying to you about his entire species. Jake closed the transmission and sat back. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding his system. It's done, he said. It's done, Rachel echoed. She sounded scared and excited at the same time. Now we wait and see what happens. They didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, the footage had been shared 10,000 times. Within 2 hours, it was trending on every major news network. People were talking about it, arguing about it, sharing their opinions. Some called Jake a hero. Others called him a liar and a criminal. But everyone was watching. By hour 3, things started getting serious. Jake, Vera's calm voice filled the cargo bay. I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. The Hunters Guild is mobilizing. 12 ships inbound to our last known location. Jake's stomach dropped. How long? At their current speed, they'll reach Rachel's station in approximately 6 hours. They're coming to silence us, Rachel said over the comm. Her voice had lost its excitement. Now she just sounded scared. They're going to try to destroy the evidence before more people see it. Jake stood up. He'd known this was coming, but knowing and experiencing were two different things. Rachel, you need to run. Get out of there now. What about you? I'm going back, Jake said. He was already moving toward the cockpit, Storm Chaser following close behind. Back to where this started. Back to Thyra 7. That's insane. That's exactly where they'll expect you to go. I know. Jake dropped into the pilot's seat and began plotting coordinates. But it's Storm Chaser's home. If we're going to make a stand, if we're going to show people that the VYRN deserve their worlds back, then that's where we need to be. Storm Chaser made a low sound. The translation matrix on Jake's belt picked it up. Home? Yes. Pack, home. Your pack might still be there, Jake said, glancing back at the VYRN. Do you think they'll help us? Pack, family. Family, protects. Jake nodded. Then that's where we're going. Vera set course for Thyra 7. Maximum speed. The ship's engines roared to life. Stars blurred past the viewport as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. Jake knew this might be the last trip he ever took. The Guild didn't make idle threats. They would come with enough firepower to vaporize his entire ship in seconds. But he also knew he couldn't run. Not anymore. Some things were worth standing up for even when the odds were impossible. The rust-colored surface of Thyra 7 appeared on the view screen 14 hours later. Jake brought his ship down exactly where he'd first landed, in the clearing near the Crimson Forest. The place where he'd found Storm Chaser caught in that trap, bleeding and dying. It felt like a lifetime ago, but it had only been a few weeks. Jake lowered the cargo ramp. The air that rushed in was warm and smelled like copper and earth. Storm Chaser moved to stand beside him at the top of the ramp, looking out over the landscape of his homeworld. Welcome home, Jake said quietly. Storm Chaser's spines pulsed with light. Blue and green this time, colors Jake had learned meant contentment mixed with sadness. Home, but home that had been damaged. Invaded. Stolen. Captain, Vera's voice interrupted. I'm detecting Guild fleet signatures entering the system. 12 vessels, all armed and approaching at combat speed. Estimated arrival, 14 minutes. Jake's jaw clenched. 14 minutes. Not much time at all. Yeah, he said. I know. Captain, I must inform you that this is not a survivable scenario. The Guild ships have enough combined firepower to destroy this vessel multiple times over. Statistically, your chances of survival are less than 0.03%. Probably not, Jake agreed. He walked down the ramp, Storm Chaser at his side. His boots hit the rust-colored ground and he took a moment just to feel it. Solid earth. Real ground. Not bad for a last stand. But Jake Mitchell had never been particularly good at accepting impossible odds. He'd made a career out of surviving things he shouldn't have survived. And he wasn't planning to start giving up now. A bright light flared in the sky. Jake looked up to see a ship dropping out of hyperspace. His heart jumped. Was the Guild here already? But no, this was a smaller vessel. A research ship. Rachel's research ship. It set down 50 meters away, kicking up clouds of rust-colored dust. The airlock opened and Rachel herself came running out. You idiot, she shouted at Jake. You beautiful, stupid idiot. You think I was going to let you face this alone? Jake couldn't help but smile. Rachel, you don't have to. Oh, shut up. She positioned her ship beside his, activating its defensive shields. They weren't much. Research vessels weren't built for combat, but it was something. Then another ship appeared in the sky. Then another. And another. Jake's breath caught in his throat. They were cargo haulers. Independent traders. Freight runners. Ships that looked like they'd been patched together with spare parts and hope. Not military vessels. Not council ships. Just regular people. Regular humans who'd seen the broadcast and decided they weren't going to stand by anymore. One by one they descended. They formed a loose circle around Jake's ship, around Storm Chaser, like they were building a wall with their own vessels. What's happening? Jake whispered. A transmission came through on an open channel. The voice was rough, worn down by years of hard work and harder living. Name's Tom Bradley. Been running freight in this sector for 30 years. Saw your broadcast, kid. Saw what you did for that creature, for Storm Chaser. Saw the proof that the Council's been lying to us. Jake's throat tightened. We don't leave our own behind, Tom continued. That's the code out here on the frontier. And far as I'm concerned, you're one of us. You and your friend both. More voices chimed in. Agreement. Support. Solidarity. Stormchaser made a sound, a long, deep, subsonic call that Jake felt in his chest, in his bones, in his teeth. It wasn't words. It was something deeper. A call to family. To pack. And the forests answered. Jake's eyes went wide as shapes began emerging from the crimson trees. VYRN. Dozens of them. Their crystalline spines blazed with bioluminescent light, blues and greens and purples that lit up the twilight like stars brought down to earth. They moved silently, gracefully, despite their massive size. They formed a protective circle around the human ships, around Stormchaser, around Jake. Some were huge, easily 3 times Stormchaser's size. Others were smaller, younger. Families. Multiple generations. Stormchaser's pack. His family. They'd survived. They'd hidden. And now they were here. Stormchaser moved forward to touch noses with a particularly large V-worm. An elder, Jake guessed, from the silver threading through the crystalline spines. The elder made a low sound and Stormchaser responded. A conversation Jake couldn't hear but could feel the importance of. Then Stormchaser returned to Jake's side. Pack here. Family here. We stand. Jake looked around at the circle of ships. At the VYRN surrounding them. At Rachel, who was grinning despite the terror in her eyes. At Tom Bradley's battered freighter, its weapon systems, probably illegal, powering up. They weren't alone. Not anymore. Incoming, Vera announced. Guild fleet has entered visual range. Jake looked up. 12 ships hung in the sky like angels of death. Sleek, powerful, built for hunting and killing. They arranged themselves in an attack formation, weapons ports glowing with building energy. A transmission came through. Cold. Official. Utterly without mercy. This is Guild Master Kyle Harrison. The human designated Jake Mitchell is wanted for theft of Guild property. The creature with him is classified as non-sentient under Galactic Council Regulation 774. All ships are ordered to stand down immediately or be considered hostile. You have 30 seconds to comply. Jake looked at Stormchaser. The VYRN looked back, those 4 eyes steady and calm. Then Jake activated his own transmitter. His voice was clear, loud, reaching every ship in range, Guild vessels, trader ships, and beyond to anyone who might be listening. This creature has a name, Jake said. Stormchaser. This creature has a family. This creature has language and culture and courage. This creature is my friend. He looked at the VYRN pack surrounding them. At the human ships holding their ground. At the Guild fleet preparing to fire. And we're not going anywhere. Stormchaser stepped forward. His crystalline spines blazed bright enough to cast shadows. He raised his head high and Rachel's translation matrix, broadcast on all channels now, carried his words to every ship, every listener, everyone watching. Human showed. You are in mercy. Showed courage. Showed pack bond. This is what sentience looks like. This is what honor looks like. The words hung in the air. In space. Across communication channels throughout the sector. Jake stood beside Stormchaser. Human and VYRN. 2 unlikely friends who'd found each other against all odds. This is what friendship looks like, Jake added quietly. The Guild fleet held position. Weapons charged. Ready to fire. But they didn't. Not yet. Because the whole galaxy was watching now. And sometimes, when the whole galaxy is watching, even the powerful have to think twice before pulling the trigger.